Mark Simpson is the Brewmaster of Dockside Brewing, so the beer that you tasted tonight, he makes it. But he also makes wine, so he kind of wears two hats. So under his own label, he makes wine, and then he also makes beer here. He also does beer at Mission Springs out in the sort of lower Vancouver Valley. So he's got quite a story. It's sort of interesting, kind of different. Because you usually only find brewmasters that make beer or winemakers that make wine as both. So I'm going to throw over to Mark Simpson.
Thanks, Richard. Welcome everyone to Dockside Brewing. It's a real pleasure to be here. I'm just feeling the passion and energy in the crowd and how interested everyone here is in the food scene. And I feel pretty lucky to have kind of grown up in the city, spent most of my adult life here, and been working in this space for quite a while. And I want to talk a little bit tonight about some of my influences and a little bit about fusion, because I've been lucky enough to work in different spaces and not just stick to one stream. I love Jane's comments about what you do with your day, because what I've done with my life is do what interests me and take the influences that have appeared before me and run with them and taking them into some, as best as I can do with those influences. And I want to share some of those influences with you. I started off doing a microbiology degree at UBC, and I was going to be a scientist. I was going to go into aquaculture and study fish farming and work on the food chain. And I started doing some visits to fish farms and decided at 21 years old I did not want to live on a floating steel pen way out in the middle of Seashell Inlet. I thought it was better to live in the city. So I got a job at Molson Breweries just down the street. And I got free beer, lived in Kitsilano, and there's lots of girls here. So that was a pretty good start. And what happened was kind of surprised me, is I got really gripped by this. I found it really interesting. So every day I went to work, it was cool, it was interesting. I did things that turned me on, that engaged my mind, engaged my body, and I got to work with some really cool people. I made beer with the guys from Kirin, Moosehead, from Coors. And as a young guy starting out in my career, I had these amazing brewmasters from all over the world coming to share their craft with me and teach me what they do. So those lessons really stuck. And I decided that at that moment, I didn't quite know how I was going to get there, but I wanted to be really good at anything I did. And I also wanted to have different influences and chapters in my life. So I didn't want to have the standard trajectory of life where I started off with this linear career path, going through little steps, working up the corporate ladder. I wanted to do different stuff. It took me 10 or 15 years to figure out how to get there and how to take this spirit that was welling up inside me and express it. And it took that journey through working with some big corporations. I went to work for Coca-Cola, made Coke, one of the biggest beverage companies in the world. I worked for Molson's, as I said. And then one day, after working in the beer space for a while, I got a call from a headhunter from Toronto that said, "Do you know anything about making wine?" And I said, "No, I don't know anything about making wine." He says, "Well, there's this company he wants to talk to you called Vincor." Anybody know that company? Well, they own a few wineries around the world, and several in BC. So then I got started in this journey making wine. And that was a whole different step, because beer making is pretty industrial, it's machines, you're inside a lot, you're in a factory. But winemaking, you're outside. All of a sudden, I'm exposed to vineyards and farming and agriculture, and having this whole other influence coming into my life. And I thought that was pretty cool. So all along during this time period, I had this entrepreneurial energy in me that wasn't really expressed. And I was making money for other people. I was working in big companies, making products to shareholders that I never met. And I found that those people's desire for earnings was relentless. I needed a way to kind of get out from under that cloud and be expressive in my own way. So I started my own consulting company called Artisan Food and Beverage Group. And I decided that it would be really a journey, a technical winemaking, technical brewing. Because I now, having gone through this cycle of experience, had some skills, some stuff to do. But then something happened I didn't experience or didn't expect at all. I went into this consulting realm and I started finding people that had energy and ideas about doing their own thing that didn't know how to get there, and I started to help them. And what ended up happening was the work became a lot about people work and inspiring them and branding and all the other stuff that we have in our food chain. Of course, there was a healthy dose of the technical stuff, the science and the yeast and the malt and grains and hops and all that. So that to me has become the best part of the journey, is the fusion of people, their ideas, their passions, and helping them get to where they want to go. So one of the things that came along was a really cool project Chambord Restaurant. So these guys, I'll pass this around because you can see how it's a beautiful bottle. I'll send that around. These folks, I met Nico and Carrie, have this restaurant downtown, and they wanted to expand it. And they had ideas about different businesses that they wanted to bring out of this. And we got together and we started talking. We came up with the idea of doing this beer. So Nico's a Belgian guy, and dreamed up this recipe with different spices and Belgian brewing techniques. And I was lucky enough to help these guys launch this beer brand. Along the way, they launched a cooking school and a daytime cafe. Anyone ever had waffles at Medina? That's the best place for breakfast in Vancouver. So I got to reach out, work with these people, do something really cool. And then I got thinking, well, what does this mean? Like, how do I keep going on this path? And then the inkling came into my mind and said, well, I'm doing these cool things for other people. Maybe I should be a brand owner. Maybe I should have my own project. And having now some experience in the winemaking space, so what should I do about this? And then I started spending time in the Okanagan, mainly to go mountain biking and skiing and climbing, because I'm a real outdoor guy. And what appealed to me about winemaking was just being outside a lot, aside from all the fun stuff. So, you know, my daily life is to spend about 200 days a year outside. Vineyards, bike riding, skiing, climbing, that kind of stuff, and being outside. So we have a beautiful space for that in the city. And you know, the diversity of farms and agriculture and spaces are amazing. And I've been lucky enough to go to some of these places. And what continually amazes me about living here is just how world-class this place is and how cool we are with our tastes and our culture. Because when I travel, I always go to other places to get influences. Like I train beer making in Belgium. I've trained winemaking in France and Australia. I've gone to these places and visited. I washed their floors just like James. Swept the grains up, carried malt, picked grapes, all that kind of stuff. When I come back here, I'm just so amazed by how urban this place is and how the tastes of the people in the city and this province are really quite sophisticated, yet very humble. So it's really, really cool to see all the restaurants springing up and the breweries and the wineries and just the tremendous diversity of talent that we have here. I'm really, really lucky to see that. And I really encourage that in my own habits. And when I go buy stuff, I buy it from the farmer's market. I try to get stuff from you know, local meats, local cheeses, drink the local beer, breathe the local air, ski in the local hills, and that's just a great thing about our city. So that brought me along to this journey. Well, how am I going to take all these influences where I've gone to other places in the world and seen what they do and brought them back? So I said, well, I'm going to create my own wine. And so that's what I did. I came up with this wine here called Siren. Let's send that around. And I had the opportunity to buy a few grapes. I started off doing it basically as a little bit of a fun exercise to create my own wine label so I could, you know, have something to show people. Because the people I compete with for business and winemaking are all very famous Okanagan winemakers, guys like Tom DeBello and people like that. And they all had huge pedigrees and long resumes. I'm really just a guy from Vancouver that nobody's heard of. So I said, well, I'm going to make my own wine. And what happened was I got carried away. I started off thinking I'd make like a small batch, maybe 2 tons of grapes. And then I started going and meeting growers and talking to them and getting engaged in their story. And they started getting interested in what I was doing. Next thing you know, I made 10 tons, and then 20 tons, and this year 42 tons. So what's happened for me is I've found really cool people to work with, like the folks at Chambord, like the folks at Dockside Brewing, like the folks at Grand Blanc Brewing I worked before. And I've been able to find these amazing collaborations where I take the energy from the clients and my co-workers and the folks that are around me, the growers, the chefs I work with, and we feed off each other and we create this cycle of excellence, this cycle of elevating each other to, you know, higher places and more interesting experiences. So that's kind of the story of my life, is the infusion of brewing, winemaking, food, restaurants, and now this agriculture theme coming in with the grape growing. So that's my story in a nutshell. And what I really want to kind of finish off with, how am I doing for time, Richard? Okay, good. What I really want to finish off with is just this thought of eat, drink, and be local. Doesn't mean you can't have a good bottle of Barolo in your wine collection and, you know, have New Zealand lamb or whatever, but spend part of your day going to the places where the local people make the food, the brewers, the winemakers, the chefs, the bakers, because I'm one of those guys, and make sure that you spend some time enjoying our city, because we truly have a world-class place here. And James, with the words up the yin yang, that's really cool. And we have amazing chefs. Simon's cooked up some nice. Simon's still here? Simon's our chef here. He cooked up some amazing food tonight, and we actually spent some time thinking about some small plates and some beers that would go with them. So I don't know if you noticed on the appetizer trays that were going around, there was beer pairings with each food. And in the beer menu that we have here, we have really focused beers that go with certain menu items. And the beer is made to go with the food, so it's really kind of a fusion kind of thing. And the thing that we'll have tonight is kind of a closing little treat, is we cooked up some really nice sorbetto, gelato. I'll have to ask the difference between sorbetto and gelato. I'm going to call it ice cream. But we cooked up some really nice ice cream fused with our dark lager. And what you find when you taste this is some really unusual textures, because the dark lager has a really smoky, kind of not quite a burnt taste, but a beautiful dark roasted malts. And the little story behind that beer and how it came, one of the many influences, is during the Olympics, we had a beer tent beside Steamworks. How many people had a couple of beers at the Olympics?
Yes.
Partying. It's not just about sports, it's about partying. So I went to this beer tent a couple of times, and they flew in these amazing kegs from Bavaria. And it's a kind of beer called Schwarzbier. Schwarzbier, anybody? It's basically, of course, Paul in the back. It's a black beer, it's a dark beer, and it's a beer made in Middle Germany that's meant to be toasty and flavorful, but not super heavy, not super strong, but it has this really unique flavor. So I was so taken by that flavor in the beer tent at the Olympics, I had to make one just like it. So the dark lager recipe that we'll try tonight is inspired by that beer tent. So I'd like to thank you all for coming. Make sure you try all the beers, and make sure you buy local, shop local, support your local brewer, winemaker, baker, ice cream maker. Thank you very much.